form to lobby against regulations and such. Actually, in Egypt, and these times of transition, which is not the transition from planned economy to free market-based economy, but I don't know, this is the multiple transitions that we have. We don't have one mass, we have many masses, and you cannot satisfy any of them. If you fix something, you will be faced by masses that resist to this thing. So the issue in Egypt now is how to disrupt this, even if with little change. This is what we cannot see as Egyptians either. And we were hoping that people from outside to have, I mean, like more clarity of the situation than us. Because you know what happened in other countries, and you may illuminate us with what we can do to change this. Even if we want to change it and we cannot change it. Even you were talking about politicians. Some of the politicians actually were the leaders, the reformists in Egypt, and now they are in the, position where they can make change and they cannot make the changes.
Thank you very much. Ms. Maha Rajab, researcher at the Ministry of Investment.
My question actually is like Dr. question. Dr. Mustafa today write an article in Shuru talking about losing hope in politicians and about all the states around the world. Actually, in Egypt, we face this problem. We lose hope in political equilibrium, so we lose hope about getting information from other political parties, which is oppositions or NGOs. We lose hope and we don't mistrust them. A huge feeling of mistrust between the political parties and the NGOs. So poor people, if the government encouraged them by subsidies, they didn't. You can say they didn't interact with the NGOs. Even the NGOs were thinking about getting the information and more information about how to lobbying against the government. So what are the criteria used in other countries or the country's experience in this issue, so we can make poor people lobbying or lobbying poor people to do some force on the government.
Thank you. And the last intervention in this round is Mrs. Dora Afiani, President of the Knowledge Economy Foundation.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Devahayan, for your very, very enlightening presentation. And what I would like to suggest, because we are totally involved as an NGO in bottom-up development in agriculture, is that besides, obviously, the importance of leadership, there is, and if you have the time to develop this, the concept of trying to come up with different models based on bottom-up decentralization, whereby one would mobilize the civil society together with private sector to come up with models which are totally based on decentralization, where activities and programs would be based on linking the bottom of the pyramid, the small farmer, based on civil society and private sector structures, and work on alternative models, which could then be looked at as solutions for decentralization. The other point I would like to make is that by any means, job creation will never be able to be achieved at the levels needed, at least in Egypt, through private sector companies or public sector companies. The one and the only way is to come up with bottom-up decentralization models which would enable the young people in particular to create their own businesses, but not left alone as it was in the past, provided with structures which would help them to develop and not to fall as they fall in the past. Thank you.
Thank you. I think most of the questions stress the political difficulty of implementing suggest to them. There are those who tended to disagree with you, and they range from people who suggest, the government, providing, facilitating patient jobs, for young people to central bank. So,
Good, good. These are great questions. Let me take them more or less in order, but I'm going to combine a few. First, no question, you need leadership. That visionary leadership is absolutely essential. My problem is, how do you get that? Right? And what do you do when you don't have that? And what I'm talking about, and let's be realistic, we don't always have that. You do get a Lee Kuan Yew or a visionary Mahathir or whatever, visionary leader, right? And by the way, some people we used to think were visionary leaders turn out to have clay feet, so let's not get too enthusiastic about some of these people. But nevertheless, the day in and day out, I got 22 countries in the MENA region. I don't have 22 visionary leaders. Right? What do I do with all of those others? Yeah, I may not have any. Anyway, but what do you do when you don't? And I really think we need to collectively figure out what to do, because we can go on hoping and wishing for visionary leaders. But the daily lives of these poor people need help. And we have to be working on that while hoping for the visionary leader to emerge. Dr. Hani, on the I think your point was that there are some management solutions rather than the political solution that I was, or in addition to or complementary to the political solutions. And I mean, that was sort of the theme of our WDR as well. But I have to say, my thinking has evolved since then, where it's true, there are lots of things you can do on the management side to fix the productivity in firms and with key performance indicators and changing incentives at the management level. But if the fundamental politics are broken, they will subvert them. And let me give you one example. This is really a graphic example. So, this doctor absenteeism and health worker absenteeism. So we thought, we're smart guys, right? So we're going to introduce a system where they have to have a timestamp machine. It's changing this, you go in and you punch your time card in, and then you get paid depending on it. And then we decided that we would do a randomized control trial. So we would introduce this in some clinics and not in other clinics, so we can see how this works and whether this lowered absenteeism. We're all ready to go. We put up these timestamp machines in 50 districts, and there were 50 other districts that didn't have them. The day before the experiment was going to start, all 50 districts had their timestamp machines vandalized. The next day. These people are a lot smarter than we are, right? So they saw the trick, right? I mean, management, if you like, is a trick. It's trying to say, a system that's politically flawed, let's come up with a gimmick to fix it. And I'm no longer convinced that unless you work on those political incentives, unless the incentive-facing politicians is going to change, no amount of management expertise is going to fix it. So I really, and I said, this is very different from what I used to say, so this has evolved over time. Yasser, my good friend and student, the bottom line, if you really pushed me, I would say, and you used to push me as a student too, I would say the point, my concern in Egypt and to some extent in Tunisia is that the transition hasn't happened. What has happened is the leadership has changed. No, it can still happen. No, what has happened is that the leadership has changed. In Egypt's case, twice. And yet, this message of bottom-up accountability, which was the message of Tahrir Square, hasn't penetrated. And only when that message actually gets through will we actually see the transition. And that is the transition. I mean, I was in Tunisia. It was very interesting. I was in Tunisia. I met with sort of below the cabinet level, the director general level people who were there from the Ben Ali times. You know, they've been there for a long time. So I sat down with them, and I said, you know, what does the transition mean to you? And their only answer was, we no longer get orders from above. But the fact that they should now be taking orders from below hasn't yet come across. It's almost a foreign idea. You know, you wonder, what do they think those people out there on the streets were saying? And to me, the message is very clear. And the school children are also saying it very clearly. Now it's up to us to listen and take that message. Now, let me just be more concrete now on things that we can do. And so let me push the envelope. So this is all about empowering the poor rather than taking it, rather than being given things to the poor. This is, what I'm really worried is that the current regimes are continuing to give things to the poor rather than empowering them. So let's take education. Why not? Instead of the current system, which is a public school system, and I read in the paper they're eliminating school fees this year or something like that, but then I also heard that uniforms have doubled in price. So it's not clear what's going on there. But whatever it is, it's a public school system where people are supposed to get free education, and they have no choice. Why not flip it around? And take the exact same money you spend on public schools and give vouchers and let people choose whatever school they want to go. Right? Now let's take that one step further. Why not take all of these subsidies and convert them to transfers? This is empowering the poor. This is giving the choice to the poor person on how to spend his money, rather than the government deciding how he's supposed to spend his money. The government decides that they should spend their money on bread, so they give them subsidized bread. What if they don't want to eat bread? Right? And that's what, you know, sometimes it sounds like Washington consensus or the same old stuff, but I really think we have to take very seriously the point that subsidies, regulations, are all ways of increasing the power of government at the expense of the poor.
I'm afraid that in Egypt you squander this subsidy, the cash subsidy, and come back to the government and ask for
The in-kind subsidies.
I don't think so. I don't think so, and I would submit.
I'm sure it happened with the public sector employees.
There's no evidence around the world that poor people are worse off with a cash transfer than a subsidy. And there's somebody was telling me today, there's a Gallup poll that showed that 70% of the people in these direct governorates were saying that they would support fuel subsidy reform. So but the thing is, I would say, you're going to get resistance, as we just heard. But I would say, I'm going to ask the very incorrect question, which is, when somebody says, well, you know, the government says we can't do that, really ask the question, why can't you do that? And they'll come up with all sorts of reasons like this is administratively not feasible and everything else. And I think it's got none of that. It's got nothing to do with that. It's got to do with the people who are earning rents from the subsidy. Right? And you know, as I said, frankly, I'm a little concerned about the measures. I mean, there's tiny measures, but you know, when you eliminate school fees, right? That doesn't increase the power of poor people. Especially if you also, on the other hand, increase the uniform fees. But on the other hand, if you had taken that same money and said, here, we're going to give you money, you choose where you want to send your kid to school. That suddenly changes the accountability of the school. Now the school, I mean, I give you an example. In Bangladesh, they did that. They introduced a voucher system for girls only in secondary school. By the way, two things happened. One is that girls' enrollment was higher than boys' enrollment and rose dramatically. The second thing is that the quality of the schools improved. So the schools started having, hiring female teachers and having separate latrines for girls and boys as a way of attracting the girls to go to the school. That changed the accountability. The girl could vote with her feet, something she couldn't do before. And I think this gets to the decentralization point. I would go even further. I mean, you're right, decentralization is one method, but quite often when we talk about decentralization, even at the World Bank, when we talk about decentralization, we're talking about decentralizing to local government. Be careful, that local government is just as capable of susceptible to capture as the federal government. Sometimes it's the same people who are capturing both.
I meant directly to civil society and the private sector.
Okay, let me go one step further. How about directly to the household? Go past civil society, go past private sector. Give the money directly to the household. And then let the local government, if they need money for something, let them tax it. Let them figure out, again, changes the dynamic, right? This is, I came up with this idea when I was working on oil-rich countries. And it is very interesting, the oil-rich countries like Gabon and Equatorial Guinea have virtually no tax system because they don't need it. Right? The government gets the money directly from the oil revenue and they spend it however they like. But that means there's no accountability. If you change it that way, where the money goes directly to the public, and then if the government needs it, they have to tax them, then people are going to start asking questions. What are you doing with my money? So there's a lot of things you can do to strengthen the power of poor people that are very different. They're 180 degrees different from what we're doing now. And they'll be resistant, and there will be people claiming that even that won't work in Egypt. But I think we got to try, because again, we don't have a choice because the people have spoken twice, loud and clear. There's no ambiguity in that signal. But I want to see some response.
Before we move to the second round of intervention, I would like just to say something about these transfers to families. In the case of education, what the government spends on education is very little if we measure it per capita. So if we give families voucher, the family will get a voucher of £10. What we spend on education compared to other countries is really very high. So with £10 or £20, the family gets, where will they go? I mean, if they can find a school, I think they will be very happy. So the problem is that our budget allocation for education is very low. I think by regional standards, by world standards, not because the government is not doing enough, but I don't know. This is the problem of the resources available for education are very limited. So I don't think this will advance us very much to say, well, forget about free education and give the families the right to choose by giving them these vouchers. So I think this is a real problem. The second comment I would like to make is that what is economically rational is not really rational unless it is politically and socially rational. So you may say something which sounds fantastic, from an economic point of view, and I study economics. But I think the responses of the people here and the responses in Egypt, if you first of all, on the question of firing workers, our businessmen succeeded in getting the workers to sign their signature before they start the job. So it is not that entrepreneurs or industrialists cannot fire workers. The worker